On your smartphone.
All around the world.
Broadcasting worldwide, online 24/7.
In your car.
At work.
At home.
On your smartphone.
This is Starr Radio UK.
The best radio show.
All around the world.
Hi, I'm Dr. Donald Palmer and I'm an immunologist. COVID-19 is still with us and making people ill every day, but it's not too late for all adults to book their first or second NHS COVID-19 vaccination. To get these vaccinations while they are still available and protect yourself and those around you, visit nhs.uk/COVID vaccination or call 119. Hi, I'm Dr. Donald Palmer and I'm an immunologist. COVID-19 is still with us and making people ill every day, but it's not too late for all adults to book their first or second NHS COVID-19 vaccination. To get these vaccinations while they are still available and protect yourself and those around you, visit nhs.uk/COVID vaccination or call 119.
Some people who have been infected with COVID-19 report still not being themselves weeks later. To help us explore when and how people can get help, I have two doctors with me.
Hi, I'm Dr. Sarah Ann Filson and I am an infectious diseases and microbiology doctor currently working in Northwest London.
Hello, I'm Dr. Abayomi Salau. I'm a consultant in rehabilitation medicine at Castle Hill Hospital in Hull, where I lead a specialist long COVID service.
Is COVID-19 still an issue?
Yeah, so unfortunately, we do still need to talk about COVID, and it is still a real issue. It's basically endemic now within the UK and across the world, which means that it's still there and it's still making people unwell, and we're still seeing people in hospital with active infection as well as the long-term consequences of that. So one of the important things I always say around this is if you haven't yet had your vaccines, it's important that you still do that, and you can still book for them, either by using the NHS website or by calling 119. And we know now from lots of evidence, and this is real world evidence as opposed to just data from trials, that actually getting a COVID-19 vaccine is the easiest and safest way for you to protect yourself against serious illness. And also, over time, we know, unfortunately, that immunity does wane. And so even if you have had COVID, it's important to consider vaccination. There are also some areas of the world where you still need a vaccine certificate, and so that's another reason to get it. We're hoping today to talk a bit more about kind of some of the other consequences of COVID and just help people understand what to look out for in relation to it.
As Sarah alluded to, we're still seeing a lot of people affected by COVID-19 symptoms many months long after they might have had the infection. And there is no way of knowing who will develop or who won't develop long COVID symptoms. So, as earlier stated, getting vaccinated and having all the right protection is the best way to go.
Yeah, I think that's really important to note, because I think often when people think about long-term consequences of COVID, they often relate it to people who have had severe disease. And I think one of the things that I've noticed, especially from the work I do within the community, is that often some of the people who have these long-term symptoms that we're going to talk a little bit more about actually may not have even had a very severe disease in the first place. They may not quite understand or know what their symptoms are a result of, but have noted that actually they've come on around the time of their infection.
Yeah, I think from our own perspective, running a long COVID survey, most patients, by the time they are referred to us, there is some knowledge in terms of, yeah, some of the symptoms might be related to long COVID or not. The rather interesting thing about COVID is we've had patients who've had infection through all the different waves of the pandemic. Yes, we had the bigger bulk of patients during the first wave, but right from the start, we're still seeing people who are having ongoing symptoms following COVID infection. And unfortunately, some of them are still being affected by breathlessness, tiredness. We've also had people who've had COVID in the last year who also have developed symptoms. And many of these patients are previously fit and well in working age group. We also know this is not just about older people or people with pre-existing medical condition. It can affect pretty much anybody, and there is no way of distinguishing who will develop long COVID. And it's not specific to any demographic or any particular age group. It can affect any age as well as people of any genetic or racial background.
How many people have long COVID and what is it, Sarah?
So I think the important thing to note is that the majority of people who have had COVID will make a full recovery, but this isn't unfortunately true for everybody. I think the current estimate is that there are probably about 1.6 million people in England alone who are experiencing symptoms that last for more than 12 weeks following a COVID infection.
Yes, we've got 1.6 million people in terms of that, and that spanning two broad groups of people. People who are still having symptoms of COVID 4 weeks after the infection. So those are people who probably will describe as having ongoing symptomatic COVID. And then most people, as Sarah said earlier on, would recover. Most of them do within the 12 weeks. But if after 12 weeks people still have not fully recovered, they are those that we will probably put in the label of post-COVID syndrome.
It's interesting because in terms of symptoms, I mean, the list is almost endless. It can range from things like feeling fatigue, having ongoing cough, shortness of breath, to problems of sleep, problems of concentration. If you look up on the NHS website, actually, there is a long list of possible symptoms that people may have related to long COVID or post-COVID syndrome. So it's important that if you think that you have these symptoms, that you consider looking into it a bit further.
There are well over 200 symptoms that have been described and reported. And yeah, also the symptoms are not there all the time. It can fluctuate. And people sometimes even report episodic events in terms of some of the symptoms. So it's not necessarily constant all the time. It can fluctuate with some of these patients.
So how important is it that people get help?
It's very important that people get help. One of the things you can do initially as kind of a self-help thing is you can look at a great website called Your COVID Recovery, which again can list some of the symptoms, but also how you might be able to do things in terms of your own lifestyle in order to improve them. And then if you feel that these symptoms are still having a massive impact on your life, then you should definitely contact your GP. Your GP may not straight away refer you to a specialist centre, but they may want to do a few tests initially, and they may want to rule out that there isn't something else going on as well. I think that's also really important for people to know, that we want to ensure that people who are having any kind of health problems or any health symptoms that they're worried about do seek help and do visit their GPs if there are things that they are worried about.
What I tell many patients is if there's a particular symptom that's worrying you or anything they're worried about, it's quite important to tell their doctor, their GP, when they see their GP. Actually state, this is what I'm worried about, this is what I'm experiencing. And they will understand, they will be able to listen and direct you into the right place or put your mind at rest and basically explain some of the symptoms or what you're feeling or what you're experiencing in there. So it's quite important to really let your doctor know what is worrying you.
So what can be done for long COVID, Yomi?
As Sarah mentioned earlier on, she's mentioned about the fantastic website lots and lots of experts' advice, and I cannot recommend it enough. It's called Your COVID Recovery, and it gives a lot of self-help guide links and practical things that makes day-to-day living easier, and suggestions on how to get over some of the common symptoms. I run a long COVID service in Hull, and we've got over 90 similar services across the country, which has been established over the last 2 years. And what we try to do is offer a comprehensive service that looks at not just the symptoms, because we also request quite a few investigations before patients are referred in. And we've been able to pick a lot of secondary conditions which are not necessarily COVID, but all of these combine together to impact on patients. So we also offer psychological input and support for many of the patients. And in addition, we also look at vocational and occupational issues, because as I stated earlier on, many of these people are working age group people. Many of them want to return to work. And as we all know, work is part of what contributes to our health. And every support and help that can be provided to people to enable them to return or retain their job will help. And that's part of what we try to put together as part of what the long COVID service developed. Yes, there might be minor variations area to area, but generally speaking, most services will be able to point patients in the right direction, either for physical therapy, occupational therapy, or psychological support as required.
And finally, Sarah, does the vaccine protect against long COVID?
Thank you. Well, as the old adage goes, prevention is better than cure. So we know that COVID-19 vaccines are the best way for you to reduce your risk of severe disease with COVID, and that includes hospitalization and death related to it. But we also know that it does reduce the risk of getting COVID overall. We also now have a lot of, again, real world data and kind of studies that have looked at the benefits of COVID-19 vaccination on long COVID. And the evidence does suggest that it does reduce your risk of long COVID. And there may even be some evidence that it may actually even be helpful for people with long COVID, although there are still ongoing studies around that. I think for me, one of the things I always say to people, I think it's really important, is it's not too late for you to get your vaccine. Even if you haven't had your first or your second one yet, please do consider booking a vaccine, because they really are beneficial and do reduce your risk overall of COVID.
Thank you so much for joining us. That was really informative.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to join your show. Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Dr. Donald Palmer, and I'm an immunologist.